Hello, everyone. Welcome to 1.5 Degrees, the podcast where together we explore the science, solutions, and stories involved in the fight against climate change. I'm your host, Heidi Pan, speaking with the professionals behind the latest research, policies, culture, and innovations shaping our response to global environmental challenges. For today's episode, we are joined by Max Sano, who is the founder and lead editor of the GreenZine, to discuss all things environmental journalism, empowering youth, and more. Max is an award-winning writer, climate advocate, and environmentalist who has been recognized as an Aspen Institute Future Climate Leader, a World Economic Forum Global Shaper, Udall and Posey Scholar, and more for his work in investigating the connections between environmental ethics, food sovereignty justice, and grassroots climate action, and for platforming youth storytelling, entrepreneurship, advocacy, and more with the GreenZine. Thank you so much for joining us today, Max. It's such an honor.
You, Heidi, for that very awesome intro. I appreciate giving the context of some of the work I've done in climate journalism and mentorship.
Yeah, no, you've done a lot. I mean, I'd love to start by talking about the work that you do with the GreenZine, which I've been following for some time now. Could you talk maybe a little bit more about its mission and how it came to be?
Yeah, so I created it during the pandemic, actually, because at the time, I was the social media chair for my college's Environmental Action Alliance, which was a student-run environmental organization. Usually, we were housed in the school's sustainability center on campus, and we ran a weekly, what it was called, Fair Trade Cafe, where we would get ingredients from local farmers markets to make into soup and grilled cheese and prepare it together, and at the same time talk about like conservation efforts, ways to get involved in, citizen lobbying, a lot of different outreach. But, because of the COVID-19 pandemic, we had to adjust. Some people were on campus, some people were still at home. And at the time, we had an email newsletter that was nameless. It was just the student, newsletter for the club members. And as part of my role, it was to do it. And I thought, there's so much interesting research and students' work that's out there that I think should be highlighted, and it wasn't being highlighted. So I talked to a few friends that were part of the club or I'd been in classes with, and not only did we begin to include like the major headlines from like New York Times, Wall Street Journal in the email newsletter, but we were getting original content, original people's work. So one student, she was covering plastic pollution measures, prevention measures in Belize based off of her study abroad research. And another student was interested in the neuroscience behind the chemicals in our brain that make us happy and sad and how to find strategies to maneuver around them, which I thought was really timely because of the pandemic. I know a lot of us were struggling with, just keeping our act together and trying to still stay focused and passionate about what we're passionate about. So it started some articles like that were, the first one being very clearly about an environmental issue and potential solutions. And then the neuroscience article trying to tie in these other seemingly tangential topics that are very much related to our environment. When you think about the word environment, it's your, psychological, your mental, your emotional environment as well. It's all connected, as people say. So yeah, it started as an email newsletter, and then other students and young people in my network, both like in person and online, were interested in contributing their own work or their own perspectives and interested in contributing in other types of mediums. So decided with one of the early contributors to design a website so that it could just be this open source information hub for young people to publish their work and also learn what other young people are interested in focusing and writing on. And so we got a lot of op-eds about, one student wrote about what they're growing up in Florida in a predominantly conservative area, what drew them towards more leftist politics. Another person wrote about their experience interning at Johns Hopkins Hospital and the ways that they can encourage sustainability from within this institution. And it became kind of a reflection space for a lot of people for their internships, for their personal thoughts, but it also became a research space as well, and a space for people to publish their poetry and to share music and art that they created around climate action and, dealing with the mental an emotional like toll that climate change has on us. And yeah, we started partnering with other organizations, both like in person and online, and including like the Audubon Society. We covered their Samara project, which is all about creating bird-friendly like pollinator gardens in urban environments, and other initiatives as well to that end. And yeah, we were able to get nonprofit status last Earth Day, actually, because of it was perfect timing. For their Earth Day, this pro bono law, or this law firm, the pro bono sector, I had applied for pro bono services, and they, for Earth Day, wanted to make what one of their campaigns to provide like nonprofit status for us, since we've been, we at the time had been purely volunteer, student run, grassroots oriented, working with people in the United States, but also abroad through, partner organizations that we've worked with, such as like A Growing Culture, which is a food sovereignty land defender based or nonprofit with people around the world, and other like student-led organizations such as Learning for Our Future, based out of Canada, Be Inspired by Stories from Africa, based in Ghana, but they've spread to multiple countries in Western Africa and Central Africa. So yeah, it's sort of just this idea for connecting people online has slowly started to become an in-person, actual formal organization, which as a young person has felt very, it's helped me get past some of the imposter syndrome I've had in the space. So sorry, that was a very long answer. But
oh no, I mean, all of that was really important to the story of the GreenZine. I mean, that's super cool that it started as like, just something that was a part of like a student organization, and it's, become something so big now. And yeah, no, just the fact that there exists this space for, youth to be able to get their hands into journalism and art and just be able to express that in this platform is super cool. So just first off the bat, really appreciative of that. Yeah. I'd love to go into, I guess, like also kind of how you came to be interested in this area. I believe you have your bachelor's in government and environmental studies, and then you minored in Arabic language and Middle Eastern culture, and you're currently undertaking your master's in food studies, policy advocacy.
yeah,
I guess like, yeah, what inspired you to pursue these areas of study, and in what ways do you think that, what you've decided to pursue in school influences what you do now?
oh, it's such a good question. As a, self-professed nerd, I was always in like multiple subjects. Like I was the kind of student that kind of, maybe except for math, although
Same here.
forget about math actually. The one professor or teacher rather that really got me into it, she was actually my algebra 2 trigonometry teacher, which people tend to like really have a tough time with that class, but it was weird. Like algebra, geometry, such a hard time. I like really struggled, but then I went to algebra 2, and the teacher just had such an interesting way of getting students involved, specifically in climate actually related subjects. He made us have to like write out like the a certain type of like slope equation that would best be used for the best design to capture
like a solar panels and stuff.
Solar panels.
Yeah.
So that was one way for me, like as a non-math type person, to really like get interested in how it can be applied. Although that was probably the only math project I've ever done that I felt actually pretty good about the grade I got. But going backwards from there, so I lived in Lower Manhattan when Hurricane Sandy hit the East Coast back in 2012. And for me, just like hearing about and seeing like the 6-foot plus storm surges and just the amount of debris that littered like Battery Park City, Lower Manhattan, was just like an eye-opening thing to me. I'd walked around to get to school and back, like through like Financial District, Zuccotti Park, and then across like the West Side Highway, and like so many of those areas were underwater. And that same year, perhaps because of that, or because it was going to be taught anyway, I watched An Inconvenient Truth by Al Gore and saw the projections for like New York City by 2040 or 2050 to be, a lot of the like southern Manhattan to be underwater and other parts of the city to be underwater. And so for me, like as a young person, like really young person, that was very alarming. And not just alarming, but it called me into action. I, with another student or two other students and that same science teacher, we submitted an experiment about which types of hand sanitizer with a certain amount of alcohol percentage, like which were the most effective at killing bacteria, inspired by Hurricane Sandy and like the need to get like emergency like equipment out there. We're acknowledged for that like as like second place in New York State for our competition. And so from a young age I was always interested in like like it's important to like be aware and understand and like be able to like soak in like what's happening around you, but like the way that you should move from like past it or move forward and apply solutions that are oriented towards like the problems that you're facing, I think has really guided me to get involved in like climate advocacy. Because GreenZine isn't just about like journalism specifically, but because of my interest in public service, I studied government and environmental studies, and the intersection I think is just very like appropriate given that so much of climate action, whether it be journalism, whether it be your engineering, resilience, like storm resilient and flood resilient, nature-based infrastructure, or you're an artist trying to like encapsulate like the nuances of climate change and how it's affecting communities, yourself, your loved ones. I think all of that should be considered climate advocacy. And so I think communication skills are really important regardless of what field you're in, and all those fields I think most fields are communication skills are important. So that's why I wanted to do GreenZine, because I'd done internships with like biodiversity conservation with Alliance for the Chesapeake Bay. I've been a sustainability intern on campus doing programming like and educational awareness. And I thought that the most important thing that we could learn as climate advocates is learning how to effectively communicate it, given the timelines that we're dealing with, based off of like IPCC reports and other like landmark reports that have been coming out for decade plus now. So yeah, I think taking those classes and getting involved in those subjects on top of the lived experience I've had with extreme weather events is what's definitely made me want to do GreenZine and continue to do it.
Yeah, no, I honestly that like really resonated with me because honestly, like Sandy for me was also pretty influential in the moment. Like I was pretty young when it happened, but like distinctly I remember being in the closet and just the fallen trees everywhere. It was very memorable, and yeah, no, definitely a part of like, what inspires me today as well. But yeah, no, just the part about turning your experiences into just what can you do in response to that is pretty noteworthy, yeah.
You don't always have the bandwidth for it necessarily. Like
Mhm.
I don't think it should feel like our responsibility every time there's a problem that we have to be the ones to like be proposing the
Mhm.
solutions. Like it's very individualistic mindset that I try to avoid as much as possible, but it's hard, especially,
Mhm. Yeah.
you know, given societal expectations, all of that. However, if you can try to find other people that inspire you to get involved in it too, that's what's helped sustain GreenZine as I'm still a full-time student.
Yeah, no, thank you for highlighting that. That's a really good point about just having that community to support you in this work because it can get, yeah, no, for sure. I'd love to go into like you talked a little bit about just the importance of being able to communicate this stuff. Like you have to work with a lot of diverse perspectives, be it in like interviewing for an article or, just collaborating with other young people. I guess like what advice do you have for navigating those conversations?
You want to go into it like being yourself, and I know it's like kind of maybe an obvious thing to say, but I think a lot of the time, sometimes when you're interacting with people like in the climate space, it can, either feel, or any space, like it can feel sometimes either transactional or you're not really sure how to contribute, and then you can maybe doubt like what your expertise is in that space. So I think going into it, knowing what your strengths, your rooms for improvement and growth are, really help you be a good like climate like advocate, climate communicator. For example, when I went to that like Aspen Institute Future Climate Leaders Summit in Miami earlier this year, I had the chance to meet, you know, people that I had been like role models of mine that I had been following like through social media for a while. And for me, like I'm a communicator like through my writing and through public speaking, but making like digital content, like very short like bursts of content that encapsulate these really, really complicated and important issues, that's really hard for me. However, in, you know, the type of work that we're doing, like you can't remove the potential tools in your toolbox. And a lot of the advice I would get from some people was, you know, you might not be comfortable making reels, but it might not be great for the first few dozen or more. It wasn't for me, but you should still do it. Doesn't mean that you won't get, you know, you won't get good at it eventually. But all that being said is, you know, it's okay to struggle through some of the stuff. We're young, so we have the opportunity to, you know, try things out. And if it doesn't work out, that's okay. So I've taken that mindset into, you know, GreenZine and our social media strategy. And we've been able to grow a lot more of our community just by people, like by creating those reels and by, you know, me tapping into my like discomfort. It's made me a better communicator in terms of, you know, talking about these issues like in like more like funny, like quick, efficient ways. Because I'm a writer, like as my default, like that's where I feel the most comfortable communicating. Besides talking, I like to talk too. But yeah, getting out of your comfort zone and finding those role models is so important. And it can be in person. It can be a lot of people I've met. I've been through online spaces, and whether we've met in person or not, we definitely have more the last years. But it's been really great to find mentors that way.
That's really cool and just great advice overall. That's definitely something I'm like coming to learn and adopt live. And you know, that's something that's really important to keep in mind. Thank you for that. And I also love to go into, I mean, your passion for writing. Like I'm very curious as to what your kind of writing process looks like, from choosing the topic or like what your favorite topics to write about are to, you know, finishing a piece. And I guess like how has it evolved since you began?
So it was back again to high school. I was a Model United Nations kid. I loved going to like conferences and was like playing almost like a role of a country or a certain person, historical like person. And for me, writing those position papers, like learning like the context of a topic, like who the main players are, what the challenges and opportunities are for a problem that you're trying to address. Like though like that mindset I think really like catalyzed like the kind of writer I am. And so, you know, I can get inspired by you know, a problem that like I see, or an experience I've had. Like I reflected, I was part of an after school program through my high school called Hudson River Community Sailing, and they worked with multiple public high schools in Manhattan, like kind of like Southie Manhattan, which is like the west, like I don't even know how to describe it, but it was in Lower Manhattan, kind of central Lower Manhattan, and we learned how to sail and marine science, different types of like water quality testing, and got credit for it after school. So that experience doing it throughout high school after school was just really inspiring to me and helped save me. So if you want to reflect and write about those experiences, like that's one great way to do it. For one, people, you know, you never know how what your experience might be a catalyst for someone else in the space to like get involved. And thinking about, you know, organizations that you think are doing really great work that you've been following or that you've seen just in a news article. I've done that route before too, and met some really amazing people and learned about the work that they're doing. For example, with GreenZine, I reached out to an account, My Earth, India-based environmental education group, and I was invited to speak on a web panel with them about sustainable food systems and communicating that, the policy solutions around that. And one of the co-panelists, she is part of a group called Green Africa Youth Organization. It's all about mobilizing young climate advocates in Ghana, as well as a few other countries now, I believe. And so learning about her work was just really inspiring. And I just asked, I'd love to interview you about your work and how it connects with sustainable development goals, and was able to write an article about that. So a lot of it started with, my experiences with an internship or with this or that experience, and then has kind of galvanized into other areas. So I wrote about federal climate policy during the Biden administration or during the Trump administration, or lack thereof, and talked about what state level climate policies existed at the time. And that galvanized me to write about other organizations in Lebanon and Ghana, like I mentioned, and then went on to writing something about food issues in my grad degree with a group called Food Tank. So it's all about uplifting different parts of the food climate movement, both different movements, food justice movements, but also climate-based movements. And that has been what I've been writing and researching on the most the last year or so, outside of GreenZine. So yeah, it's taken a lot of different directions, and tends to once you get involved in these spaces.
You've worked in being a mentor for a lot of people in this area, and just young people in general. And I guess what have you been finding to be and also from your own perspective as well, just something that young people these days need most in terms of support, and what is your approach to mentorship?
Yeah, I think that young people just want to be given a chance just to get their foot in the door somewhere. And it's something that I've felt too, starting to apply to full-time jobs for postgraduate life. That has been something that, having that mentor system is just, or mentor support is just so important, because you maybe don't even know the type of jobs or titles that you want to apply to. You don't know if you even want to stay in the same field potentially that you studied in college, and that can feed anxiety and doubt, and not being sure which direction to go, or feeling oh, I didn't go straight into whatever I studied right after school, that reflects my ability to do what I'm passionate about or what I initially set out to do. And all of that I've tried to impart, not just on others that I've mentored, but on myself, that it's not true. Your growth is not linear, and it's okay if you don't able to find the dream job right out of school. It's something that I've had to come to terms with. And I think in terms of being a good mentor, framing it in analogies outside of work make it really helpful when trying to impart career advice. For example, I was a martial arts instructor for most of high school and a little bit of college. I've done martial arts since I was a kid, and I think following principles of a black belt and following that, and also using analogies to sailing or to mental health and wellness, be it physical working out or taking the time to slow your breath, all these other life experiences I've had, I try to bring those to the table when I'm talking to people, because it makes the whole me, it's contributed to me as a person, both professionally and personally. And so bringing those sides of you, I think, whether it's, as a mentor to show that, you're a real person, outside of all the work that you do, but also as a mentee, I think being able to communicate you and your values and what you care about doing outside of work will directly translate into the kind of person you're going to be in your workspace. And learning just how to be vulnerable in general is hard. With some people, your friends and family, let alone, people that you might be working in your career. And sometimes those lines blur too when you, especially in the climate space, so many friends I've made, I'm now working on projects with them potentially. And so like learning how to like be clear in your own values, I think will help open doors for you, be it professionally, or personally.
I've written in the past about your experiences with like eco anxiety and just, like your relationship with the environment in terms of like your mental health and whatnot. I'd love to like, I guess, and I mean, also I'll be linking your writing in the description because it's definitely worth reading. I mean, can you talk more about, I guess, your experiences with that and how you navigate that today?
Yeah. A good question. I wrote that article, oh man, I think it was last summer now. And, it was kind of reflections coming out of college. And some of the things I've actually already brought up in passing with sailing, martial arts, other things that I've done. Sometimes in the climate movement, like many movements, like whether you're like, in crypto or Web3, or you're really super into like, like mushroom cultivation, like in all these different things, like there's all these, like you're in your bubble, right? And so when you talk to people outside of whatever bubble you're in, it can feel very jarring. And I had that experience a lot in college, trying to get people that weren't as involved in climate issues, because it's, I think, not just a professional career path, but it's a lifestyle in a lot of ways. Like people make
Yeah.
it, it's a very all encompassing. And I think it has its positives and its negatives, because sometimes it can come off like, like a tinfoil hat kind of like vibe sometimes. But at other times I've found such like valuable, just like human connections with people, like being able to like bond over both, the anxieties around climate change and all like the beauties of like humanity and like non-human living beings just through my climate friends. And so going back to that particular article, like I talked about how, you're going to be much happier and less anxious if you go into the conversation knowing that it doesn't matter if climate issues or climate space, however you like choose to frame it, if it's not part of their forefront, that's okay. And you shouldn't expect it to be part of the forefront of everyone else's lives. But I think if you can go into it, like having that mindset, you are much more likely to have positive impact, like in terms of like maybe trying to sell someone to, go meatless Mondays, or can completely switch to plant-based, or, look over your article, because I would share articles with friends and, not everybody wants to read every single one of your pieces, and that's okay. And like coming to terms with some of this stuff really helped me with my like eco anxiety generally, because, people could choose to appreciate it. It could choose to go on with their lives and not want to like think about it in the terms that I set for it. And relinquishing that control was really healing to me, because, it made it less, oh man, if you don't do this, like they're never going to learn. They're never going to understand like what like the stakes are. It's like, it's not all about you, it's okay if you're not the right person to get someone involved in the space. And, it's not your duty to do that. If you, maybe that's not true. Maybe it is your duty to, try to like impart your experiences and, what you care about. Like everyone's entitled to that. I guess what I mean is, you shouldn't feel like you've failed, so to speak, if you can't like make every single person you meet a climate warrior. I think that's really been healing to me, coming to terms with that. I think it's just a growing up thing, maybe, or I don't know.
Yeah, no, I mean that's definitely something that I'm actually experiencing as well. Like just that's a really good point to make. It's sometimes like there seems to be a little bit of pressure in the movement to do that. And I mean, it is an important mission to, get people on board. But that's a really good point that it's not something that you can really force onto people at all. Yeah, that's a
And
good
that
point.
and that like, well, and having that mentality, like not being gracious with people, feeds into the narratives of like eco-fascism and getting like making like the like being sympathetic and aware and involved in climate action and is some fringe issue. Like, and that's how it's framed in a lot of circles.
Mm.
And I think that, it's dangerous for a lot of reasons, but mostly that because so many people do care about it already, it's just a matter of being as chill about it as you can, I guess, for lack
Yeah.
of a word, because, it's easy to fall into doomerism, which is, very problematic for a lot of reasons.
Hmm. For sure, for sure. Yeah, no, I mean,
But
yeah, I guess this kind of like leads, it's like somewhat related to my next question about there's sometimes that, I guess, responsibility in terms of climate journalism to communicate stories and current events accurately or whatnot. How do you approach that in terms of also, like bringing your perspective into it? And I guess, like, how do you hope your climate journalism will be perceived or received by readers? Is that something you ever keep in mind?
yeah, it's something that I've tried to keep in mind a bit more recently, like, because I don't have it, I haven't studied journalism. Like, that isn't specifically what I've studied. So I've
Hmm.
tried to learn the best I can, like, how to have that journalistic integrity from, a career journalist, journalism student. And I think specifically with climate journalism, it's very science and data driven. And I think being able to frame both like the context and the problem and also the solutions, you have to have that science and data literacy. And, that takes time. And, you're not like, no one's perfect. You're not always going to get it right, but always framing it in that context, I think is super important, not just in building credibility with potential skeptical audiences, but
Hmm.
also, you know, as journalists, like you're supposed to be truthful. You're supposed to be, there's like this pull between being objective, I think, that you have
Hmm.
to be objective and tell it how it is, but you're also trying to advocate for solutions at the same time that people may or may not fully agree upon, even within the climate movement. So that's been something that I've personally been challenged with as a non-journalist journalist.
Hmm.
And I've tried to like clear with people too, like if you want to insert your own um, opinions into an article, you have to do it in the context of like being like just transparent about it.
Hmm.
If you want it to be just a straight up like op-ed piece, or if you have a certain angle with the piece that highlights, for example, a company that's having a certain type of impact on um, soil erosion, and they're doing this specific solution that's proven to have a track record of working, and it just so happens that that's what you believe in, you have to just tread lightly because it can impact, like you were saying, it can impact your credibility. So you just have to like go into it like knowing who your target audience is. Um, that's a huge thing. Another thing is, what is your intended impact from this article? Is it to like raise awareness of like an impending court case that's happening? Is it just to have like a current events like Associated Press style piece where you literally just tell the facts as it is? Like journalism has a spectrum of being from, just information communication to
Hmm.
um, like being like a tool for advocacy or for
Hmm.
special interests. And
Yeah, yeah.
that can be dangerous, even if it's for a special interest that you believe in. It might
Hmm.
disrupt whether or not it's your story you're writing is credible. But if you know that going into it, at least you can be prepared on how to frame whatever topic you're talking about. And I could talk about that for a lot longer, but I'll leave it at that.
No, I mean, all of what you just shared is so important. Like, it's just keeping that in mind and just making sure that you're transparent about that. That's really important. Yeah, no, thank you for that. Um, and I guess like also in terms of what you've been working on, like a lot of, I guess like young people, including me, we just like sometimes we have ideas for impactful projects, but like sometimes it's harder to get started because there's so many just like challenges. I guess like what are some of your challenges that you experienced or just some things that were like kind of like a learning curve? And I guess like what advice do you have for navigating what you had experienced or just I guess in terms of making ideas come to fruition in general?
Yeah. First and foremost, don't do it alone. I made
Oh
that
yeah.
mistake with GreenZine at first. It started as like a solo project pretty much, where I would, I was responsible for everything, and it was my baby, and in a lot of ways it still is. It's something that I really care deeply about. But I learned and branched out and found other people that believe in the mission and what we started as, and wanted to help craft it in not a new direction, but just to make it, to build upon what it started as. And so I would say, if you really have a strong idea and you care about it, go for it. Like you can start it, you can do it, but if you want to sustain it and really be able to like pull off some pretty cool initiatives and, have a bigger reach, like you need to have a team. And it doesn't have to be, like it can be a friend, it can be a teacher, it can be a former internship supervisor. All three of those type of people are what are on GreenZine, both in terms of the board of directors for the nonprofit, but also like in the core team. Like 2 or 3 people had written and been part of Sign It Forward, which is a storytelling project group based out of George Washington University. And I got a lot of my journalism experience, writing experience from them initially. So yeah, like find community, like find people that care and about what you're talking about. But you have to know obviously what the project is going into those conversations are. And if you don't know, then just have conversations and share ideas. And it shouldn't feel like you have to start something new to be involved and have an impact. Because I think there's and it's something that I've thought about too with GreenZine. Like there's so many other organizations that do similar work that we do, but not just us, but other organizations as well, like with conservation, with lawsuits on the environment, although there should be more for those objectively. All that being said, I think finding your community and learning how to like carve out a space for you in the climate movement that's doing something that you don't see it happening. Like in terms of starting your own project, like think about that. Think about if you want to make a lot of your downtime your passion project, because it's exhausting, it's taxing. When you're a student, you are thinking about, your own development, but when you have an organization or a group, it's the group's development. And, it's like there's finite resources, there's also finite time. So
yeah, and just finite energy to devote to this, because we're all human and we have all sorts of things to do, and it's
sure you faced that with your podcast. It happens. It's a normal human thing. You got to pick up the slack some week because maybe for a few weeks you had to focus on other things, and that's okay. It's not going to be perfect 100% all the time.
Yeah, no, that's really great advice. It's something I'm trying to get better at too myself. So that just definitely really resonated. Thank you for sharing that.
Yeah, of course. Eating a little bit every day helps with that too.
Yeah, and this is something that I've asked every podcast episode. But if you could turn back time, butterfly effects aside, and tell your younger self something that you've learned from life so far that you wish you had known earlier, what is something that you'd say to them?
Many things, but one thing I would say is be kinder to yourself and don't frame what you do based off of like what you think others are going to think about it. Follow your heart, be percept, listen to the people that you care about, like what their advice is, like be all of those things I just said. That was more than one thing, but yeah.
Those are all important things. So yeah, and I thank you again for that. I just smacked my water bottle. Gosh, like, also, I guess, like, where do you hope to see the mission of, be it like GreenZine or just in general, like, where do you see yourself in a few years from now?
Yeah, so ideally, GreenZine would still be going. I hope that we can continue doing that project. So I'm also an advisory board member for Resilient Youth Network, and they're a nonprofit org based out of Boston, but there's team members everywhere, and GreenZine will be helping them with their fellowship program. 16 to 20-year-olds that want to get involved in climate action, but specifically in the resilience space. I'll be helping them with their fellowship program in terms of getting people published through that. So I would love, to continue helping with that project, building new, continuing like partnerships with higher education institutions, other education groups, community groups to, provide like writing and communication development experiences. I want to continue doing more of that, applying for more grants to, be an information hub, a resource hub, a mentoring hub. But outside of GreenZine, I want to be a policy advocate. I studied food policy and agricultural policy and advocacy for my graduate degree, and I'm hoping out of school to be able to communicate with elected officials, with their staff, with just different stakeholders across the board, the importance of climate policy and the solutions that are out there, trying to connect people between the agricultural sector and the climate movement, which is beginning to become more of a thing. But I want to continue to build those overlaps, and oceans policy and water policy, because that is also its own silo that I've been learning from ocean advocates like such as Bodhi Patel and Carissa Cabrera from Future Swell and several others about the importance of connecting our oceans and water policy to agricultural policy to climate policy. I want to be a connector for these different movements in my professional life. I'm hoping to move to Washington, D.C. once I graduate this fall to work either on the Hill or with a group that pushes Congress and the administration to do more, while also continuing to be a teacher, to continuing to be a student. So I'm going to be busy even when I'm done with school.
Oh gosh, yeah, no, but that all sounds super cool. And I mean, yeah, no, I guess like just for listeners that would love to, keep up with what you're doing, where can they find you?
Yeah, so my LinkedIn is sort of like I want to make a personal website, but that's its own project. So
Own project, yeah.
yeah, you can follow me on LinkedIn if you want to see more of like, I share my thoughts on articles, both GreenZine and otherwise, and policy stuff. I'm going to be doing more. You can follow me there. If you want to check out GreenZine, you can go to GreenZine, that's ZINE, .org. If you want to write for us or join, you can go to greenzine.org/join. There's a quick survey for writing, and we're going to actually try to launch a volunteer form if you want to join us to, build out some of our projects that we're going to do the next few months. So yeah, be sure to follow up. And if anyone wants to have a one-on-one mentoring meeting, feel free to reach out.
Awesome. Yeah, no, I'll be sure to link everything down below or whatever, do the gesture thing. It's very odd every time, and I say that every time too, now that I'm realizing that. Thank you for taking the time to speak about these things, because, just we need to have a lot more of these conversations.
Yeah, of course. Glad I could share this time with you, and good luck with the start of your semester this fall.
Thank you. I will probably need it. We'll see.
Me too.
I definitely about being a student and doing all this on at the same time. Gosh, yeah.
Yeah, it's very unrealistic, but we're here. We're still doing it somehow. So
I guess
get it done.
What matters. Yeah.